Hello, um, greetings everyone, and welcome to our third OMI JPIC Laudato Si webinar. Today, the presentation is titled Emerging from the COVID-19 Pandemic, Guidance from Laudato Si, and our presentation will be given by Joe Gunn. And following this, we will have a video entitled Project Grace Urban Gardening by Father Eduardo Vasquez in the Philippines. I am Warren Brown, an Oblate priest and a general counselor for Canada and United States region. If you look at your bottom of your screen, you will, under the section that's called interpretation, you will see that you can click on for Spanish or French translations of the English translation of the English talk. And I kindly remind you to mute your microphones as we begin. We will begin with a prayer.
All-powerful God, filling all the universe and the smallest of your creatures, you embrace all life with tenderness. Oh yeah. Pour out the power of your love that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace that we may live as sisters and brothers. We thank you. Oh, we thank you. Oh, we thank you for being with us every day. Hey, hey. We thank you. Oh, we thank you. Oh, we thank you for being with us in every way. God of the poor, help us to rescue the lost and forgotten of this earth. So precious in your eyes, oh yeah. Bring healing to our lives and we'll protect the world from all this confusion. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the earth. We thank you. Whoa. We thank you. Whoa. We thank you for being with us every day. Hey, hey. We thank you. Whoa. We thank you. Whoa. We thank you for being with us in every way. Teach us, oh God, to discover the worth of each and everything, to be filled with awe and contemplation, oh yeah. To see we are united with every little thing as we journey to your light. Encourage us, we pray, to work for justice, peace, love, and understanding. We thank you. Whoa. We thank you. Whoa. We thank you for being with us every day. Hey, hey. We thank you. Whoa. We thank you. Whoa. We thank you for being with us in every way. We thank you. Whoa. We thank you. Whoa. We thank you for being with us every day. Hey, hey. We thank you. Whoa. We thank you. Whoa. We thank you for being with us in every way.
Welcome again. So this morning, we welcome, as I said, Mr. Joe Gunn. In February of 2019, the Assumption, Lacombe, and Notre-Dame-du-Cap provinces in Canada of the Oblates of Mary Immaculate opened the Centre Oblat, a voice for justice. This new ministry initiative focuses on poverty, ecological justice, responsible extractive practices overseas, and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and Joe Gunn was named the Centre Oblat's first executive director. The call to do justice is described by Joe as his life's vocation. He has led social justice ministries for a Catholic archdiocese in Western Canada, religious congregations of both men and women, the ecumenical charity Citizens for Public Justice, as well as serving for 11 years as director of the Office of Social Affairs for the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops. And for 7 years, Joe lived and worked in Central America. St. Paul University granted Joe the Eugene de Mazenod Medal in April 2017. This medal honors individuals who have made significant contribution to the development of human capital in their community. We welcome Joe Gunn. After his talk, we will have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions.
Well, thank you very much, Father Warren. Welcome to everyone. I'll share my screen with you and you'll see a few slides, which is much, much better than looking at me. And we'll proceed with the presentation. So the topic, as you know, is how we can emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic with guidance from the encyclical from Francis called Laudato Si. So I'll try to do 3 things today. You know how Jesuits always start with 3 things? They say they'll do 3 things and then they do 5. I won't be that tricky. I'll just do 3. So we'll look at a little bit at the major principles of Catholic social thought as presented in the encyclical and reflect on some of those. We'll look at some of the major revelations that COVID-19 crisis has brought us with a view to Canada, because that's the reality I know best, but also because many of you are participating from around the world. We'll try and talk about at least some themes that I'm sure will affect not only Canadians, but people around the world. And then finally, maybe have a conversation about there are many things, different ways that we can respond, but we'll take a peek at a few, and maybe I'll try to provoke some thinking, and you can decide what's more appropriate in your own context. So indeed, Catholic social teaching, there are really kind of 4, there are many principles that could be forward here, but they're really, shall we say, 4 that are particularly important: the dignity of work, the dignity of the human person, especially. We see that now with the health crisis, how what is really important is health and helping each other through this. We do need to look at global solidarity and the common good. Francis defines the common good in one of his writings as really looking at just not doing the whatever works best for everybody, but he really talks about it being linked to the preferential option for the poor. So we'll look at that, if you will. We do need to look at structures in our society and how we can actually restore some of what we've lost through the pandemic. And in Canada, I'll mention very briefly, but it is key for the Canadians to work at reconciliation with Indigenous people in our country. And finally, if you'll allow me, I think rather than perhaps going through the entire encyclical, which many of you already have done, if we could focus on this main theme of ecological, integral ecology that the Pope seems to focus on, I think this is most important and most instructive. So we know the encyclical was released 5 years ago, and I must say that this is being translated by 2 wonderful and long-suffering oblates, Father Diego into Spanish and the Père Daniel that's translating in French. So our thanks to them. I'll try to speak slowly. You won't have to translate everything that's on each slide, but we really appreciate your help so that more people can participate. But this idea of integral ecology has been called a new paradigm for justice. And you may recall that Cardinal Turkson of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development has called Laudato Si the new Rerum Novarum, which was the foundational document of what we think of as Catholic social thought. So integral ecology really is this link that we all need to hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. So there's a social approach and an ecological approach. And the Pope also notes in Laudato Si that, when we don't hold the environment up for protection, we're also liable to not hold up protection for vulnerable people in our society, whomever they may be. Care for Our Common Home is a subtitle in English for the encyclical. And the Pope wants us to realize how everything is connected. If you're working in academic circles, academics often refer to this today as intersectionality, race, class, gender, all these kinds of issues are helpful in perhaps I think what we would call in our tradition integral ecology. So the Pope sees the very basic philosophical problem that we have today as a misguided anthropocentrism, this idea that human beings are above everything and more important than everything. He kind of counters that with an idea of the web of life. We all have to see ourselves as involved in a web of creation. And it's fascinating to see, those of you will recall who were touched by the Black Lives Matter protests in the United States after the murder of George Floyd, when he said, "I can't breathe." Of course, COVID is a disease that affects our lungs as well, that we can't breathe. But whether it's those racist actions or unhealthy air or climate change or these kinds of things, this idea of we can't breathe and to help each other live fully and to have breath is really important. I was shocked last week. You may have seen, here we have a Pope who only last fall, a year ago last fall, organized a special synod on the Amazon. And some oblates in Western Canada, like Father Ken Forster, who's on this webinar, are organizing a series of meetings to talk about how Canadians can look at the implications of what came out of that synod. But here the Pope talked about the Amazon as being the lungs of the planet, didn't he? And last week, the Archbishop of Manaus in Brazil is begging his country to send oxygen because people are dying in the hospitals because of a lack of so here we have a lack of oxygen in the place that's the lungs of the planet. It's so ironic. So integral ecology asks us to examine these economic links to climate change, growing levels of inequality, our precarious work. Now people are without work in many ways, and all these widening social cracks in our societies. Maybe COVID has shone a light on that. The Pope sees climate as a common good, and climate change is one of the key principal challenges facing humanity in our day. And this carries forward in many other adjoining crises, mass migrations around the world, people being forced to leave their lands, conflicts over resources are huge and often pushed by our changing climate. We have 1 million species at risk of extinction, what scientists call biodiversity loss, which is extreme. And we may have more pandemics. This will not be the last one, of course. It isn't the first in human history. And basically, the Pope is asking us to think that really to repair our relationship with the planet is part and parcel of responding to the global pandemic. COVID was what's called a zoonotic disease. It started in a wet market in China, perhaps, passed from other species, animal species, into humans. And that's because we pressure all of the other living creatures on Earth, and we have to address this. Now, very, very briefly in Canada, just to say a summary, COVID has hit hard here. There are even some oblates that are COVID positive right now, so we'll remember those those men in our prayers. We've had 18,600 people that have died. Lots of people who have thankfully recovered, but we're just learning about some people that have long-term difficulties with recovery. Some don't recover fully immediately, and there are some ongoing problems with that. Both of the new variants that have been discovered in other parts of the world are now in Canada, we know, and the vaccines have arrived in Canada, some, and they're being deployed as possible. So that's some good news, I suppose, for Canadians. But the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted these, what you might call intersecting crises. Many people around the world might think Canada is a very, very privileged country to live in, and we would agree with that, of course. But we look at the precarity of our labor market, some social divisions, and we realize that if you ever hear that we're all in the same boat, I'm afraid that's not the case. We have a lot of people that are suffering more than others of us that are able to perhaps stay at home and work from home, et cetera, that people that have homes. But we also see around the world the 2,200 billionaires around the world. Those people, mostly men, they accumulated almost $2 trillion in new wealth in the first 6 months of the pandemic. And in Canada, we had our top 20 billionaires actually earned an extra $37 billion in just the first 6 months of the pandemic. So it's good to keep in mind that we're not really all in the same boat. Some are traveling in yachts, and others are holding on to leaky rafts. And this is nowhere more brought home to Canadians than our long-term care crisis, where elderly people are in long-term care homes, where almost 80% of our deaths have occurred. And in the two largest provinces in Canada, both Quebec and Ontario, it's amazing we had to actually call the military in to help care for people when the crisis got overwhelming. And these are not new problems, of course, because some of these homes are, private for-profit businesses. Some of those are particularly hard hit, it must be said. And Canadians have known about this before, but I think there's a renewed emphasis on trying to address this issue because it's been so difficult there. But also gender equality has been a huge difficulty and problem. We know that women earn less than men on average in Canada, even before the pandemic hit. And women have been much more aggressively hit, if you will, in their earnings and their lifestyle choices by the pandemic. This is because so many women work in sectors that have been affected, like hospitality, healthcare work, restaurants, these kinds of things, and that if schools are closed, as has been the case at sometimes in some provinces, of course, women are not able to return to work if they're doing primary care of kids at home or caring for ill relatives. So we really see that a lot of the gender breakdown for people that are doing healthcare, whether it's personal support workers in homes or nurses' aides, those folks are usually women, and so the crisis is particularly hard on them. And of course, many of those kinds of jobs are less well paid. About sometimes, in the case of Ontario, the province where I live, maybe half of the average income for nurses' aides and orderlies. Racialized women, newcomers to Canada, are totally overrepresented in those low paying jobs. When I was a younger man and worked in an elder care home, I was the only male, and all of the people that I worked with were women from the Philippines or the Caribbean. And for people to be able to return, women to be able to return to work, especially, we need a child care program, which we have a kind of a mix and match of programs. Some provinces better than others. Quebec is better on this, but we need a plan across the country. And I think we need to address the growing problem of gender-based violence. Shelters are reporting in Canada that they get 30 to 40% more cases of because people are at home together. There's more drinking going on in some cases, and there's more violence, again, in conjugal violence in the home setting now that more people are spending more time there. That's very unfortunate. So here's just a couple of graphs to make this point of how uh, unemployment for women was more severe than for men in the pandemic, and indeed how even though we've had a little bit of a recovery, uh, more men were able to rejoin the workforce while a lot of women, more women actually lost their jobs. So that's just a graphic example of what I was saying. Now, we believe in the dignity of the person as a foundation for a moral vision of society, and that's what Francis has certainly emphasized. So we really have to look at issues around what we call now the essential nature of what's called the care economy, uh, and that is a whole range of issues: caring for children, schooling, care of the elderly, uh, supporting disabled people. All these kinds of jobs, are they not essential too? There's quite a conversation with each lockdown in the pandemic about what is essential and what is not. Uh, I find it interesting that in certainly our province, if not most of the country, uh, the sale of liquor is considered essential. But I think maybe our definition of that needs to be a little broader. And what we've seen, of course, that workers in general, low-wage workers, have lost. Those people in Canada earning $14 an hour or less, those have been the people that have been particularly hard hit. And those that earn over $48 an hour, uh, most of them did pretty well. Only 4% of them either lost their jobs or lost hours of work. So these are some of the things we've seen in Canada, and work has been undervalued. Certain kinds of work, not only uh, in home work, care work, but we can see that meat packing plants in Canada were places of great outbreaks. There's a Mexican family, a Canadian family of Mexican descent in Alberta, where uh, the father of the family died in a cargill plant, meatpacking plant, and the family is trying to sue the company to say that they didn't provide protections for the workers there. Many new Canadians working there, and this is also the case in Southern Ontario and other places where we have a lot of migrant farm workers that are brought from Mexico or the Caribbean. These people do not receive the same protections and often live in barracks and other kind of crowded conditions where uh, it's very, very difficult to make sure that you stay safe from COVID-19. Now, of course, Francis wrote Laudato Si over 5 years ago. And so he's talked about the pandemic as early as March 27th last year. There was a speech about that, but also his most recent book I found most instructive, the book called Let Us Dream, which was just released on December 3rd last year. And here again, what Francis does is there's a fascinating part where he talks about the three COVIDs that he lived in his own life, these times of having to stop and to think and be severely challenged in his own life. But he also talks about these hidden pandemics: hunger, violence, climate change, war. Uh, we saw this week, the whole issue of the world trying to take on the issue of a nuclear arms treaty, which unfortunately Canada has not signed. But look at the arms spending. And Francis refers to all of those kinds of things in his thinking. It's very holistic. And of course, the Pope has really got a view on global solidarity, just not in well-to-do countries like Canada, where you can look at how there is a lack of services for people in many, many situations. Oxfam would tell us that nearly 3 billion people across the developed world didn't have access to all of the things we do in developed countries. And indeed, uh, there are some stunning statistics, 700 million people living in extreme poverty. And the world, of course, through the Sustainable Development Goals is trying to address this. But here was if you look at the Brookings Institution from the United States, uh, it, it's a kind of a stark graph that points out how a number of countries are particularly uh, vulnerable to having the numbers of people who live in extreme poverty uh, really, really rise because of the effects of the pandemic. In Canada, I suppose in the Lacombe province, there's a particular close relationship with Kenya, and you can see that's number 8 down in the list here. Father Jerry's on this uh, webinar this morning, and others, I'm sure. So there are a number of countries where oblates work, where the pandemic is really going to have very, very huge impacts. And Francis asks, is this drama just about COVID, or what about what has COVID uncovered? So again, maybe some 60 million more people will be thrust into extreme poverty. The first time this century that the number of poor will rise in that way. What we see in Canada is many families of recent arrivals to Canada send home remittances to countries like the Philippines and others. Those are going to be affected if people are working less and earning less money. Fitch is a company that looks at the indebtedness and the ability of countries to pay back debts, and 33 countries have been downgraded in their by Fitch at this time. So there's difficulties for countries that are having to pay back debts while they face this massive crisis. And a World Bank study of people in Bangladesh just showed 70, high 70s up to 80 and so on percent of people are being affected. So these numbers are much higher than in countries like where I live. We did see that during the crisis, the greenhouse gas emissions around the world seem to have gone down by 7.2% because of so many lockdowns and the end of people driving cars or able to travel by air and so on and so on. But we still have a climate emergency. And we often refer to this new era in Earth history as the Anthropocene, a time when human beings actually have the power to change the climate, the first time in world history. And so we're dealing with this new problem of human activity changing the very climate we live in. And the best scientists in the world have suggested that we have this decade to do something about that. And we have the Conference of the Parties, the UN Conference of the Parties on Climate Change, COP26, starting in November in Glasgow, when countries are supposed to come up with new targets for cutting their greenhouse gas emissions. With a shout out to our American brothers and sisters participating in the webinar, it was interesting for me to see Joe Biden's comments actually talk about a cry for survival, which may have been, you know, perhaps an echo of the cry of the earth and cry of the poor of Leonardo Boff and then Pope Francis. So Hopefully, the countries of the world led by the United States now, or rejoined by the United States as they join the Paris Accords again, will set us on this route. But we have a lot of work to do. When you look at Canada, you can see that this is a graph from the federal government itself in Canada. Our greenhouse gas emissions have not really decreased. You can see the biggest decrease is the 2008, 2009 financial crisis when the economy took a hit. You should be able to see the decision of the government of Ontario to end coal-fired plants for producing electricity. But what we did was, in this country, we exported more oil from tar sands projects and built more pipelines, and now we're building natural gas pipelines for export, and even 6 projects proposed for coal exports. So some of us are hoping those don't go through. But Canada, as you can see here, has a lot of work to do. We have never met one of our targets ever, no matter what government, for cutting greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. So we need more ambition for climate change action. And we need to do a range of things, but it should start with, it would seem to me, the first thing you do when you're, in a hole is stop digging, as they say. We fund billions of dollars to fossil fuel companies in this country. And a great way would be to direct that money into renewable energy, into the healthcare kinds of systems we need, building retrofits, all kinds of things that we need to do. So the churches in Canada are calling for us to reduce our greenhouse gases by 60% by 2005, do that from 2005 levels, to do this by 2030. The government has a much lower target than that, the same target that the previous Conservative government had for Canada, and we've never met those targets to begin with. So that's why our churches are working to try and change that situation. In Canada, let me say very briefly that we also have to look carefully at reconciliation and justice for Aboriginal peoples in all that we do. We could use Indigenous wisdom and knowledge about the earth and about organizing society to be able to go forward. These are many people still in close proximity to nature. They live the impacts of climate change. We had a situation in February where a natural gas pipeline was going to go through land of the Wet'suwet'en people in British Columbia, natural gas that would be exported to Asia, and blockades happened all across the country. Father Ken Thorson wrote a letter asking the government certainly not to send in troops to try and open up the railways and respond to this crisis way back then. But we still have many, many issues with Aboriginal rights, Indigenous rights in Canada. And unfortunately, last week, our federal government gave some statistics on how COVID is at an all-time high in Indigenous communities. The difficulty here is, of course, that many of these communities are isolated. They have few health resources. 8% of all COVID cases are among Indigenous people in Canada, who only make up 5% of our population. It's higher in some provinces. And the real problem is cramped housing. And we still have 63 drinking water advisories in First Nations reserve in Canada. The government promised in 2015 to end all of those. Some progress has been made, but 63 communities still have to boil their water. So this makes it very difficult for people to keep clean and to provide social distance when you have 6 or 14 people living in each home. Francis, of course, in Laudato Si 146 talks about how it's essential for us to engage Indigenous communities as not merely one minority more among others, but they should be the principal dialogue partners. And I think this is happening with with some of the oblates for sure in Canada who work directly in ministry with Indigenous people. We need to bring the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People forward. There was a bill presented in Canada to do exactly that in December. Just yesterday, Father Luc, Père Luc Tardif, and Father Thorson both signed a letter of Canadian churches calling on the government to move forward with this legislation because it was presented in the House before and didn't pass. Passed the House, I should say, but didn't pass the Senate, didn't become law. And so this is kind of unfinished business for us. And several oblates will be participating in a call at the end of this month, a briefing with the minister to try and encourage this legislation to go forward. I wish our bishops, the Catholic bishops, would participate in this process, but we haven't seen that yet. But glad the oblates, the oblate provincials are stepping out. So we need to see these efforts towards including Indigenous voices, participation, their wisdom, their experience, helping us to suggest ways forward in facing many of these crises. Now, just a little bit of information that might be specific to Canada, but might be useful for folks around the world looking at these issues. Some people say we can't really afford to do what we need to do to emerge from the pandemic, to address ecological destruction, and to create more equality in our economic lives. But when you look at the debt of any country as a percentage of its gross domestic product, that gives you an idea of if even a country goes into debt, and all are going into debt now, into deficit, and then adding to their debt as we have more need for health spending and for supporting people who must not be able to return to work, et cetera, et cetera. So we're all doing that. But these are statistics from the G7, the largest economies in the world that are part of the G7 here. And you see that Canada has a pretty low debt to GDP ratio. And so it's not it's really not an issue for us to not be able to step up to the plate and do what's necessary to address some of these issues. Especially when you look at what we've done in Canada and maybe in many other countries, perhaps where you live, we've allowed corporate profits to rise over the last 20, 30 years. But you look at the tax rate for corporations has fallen precipitously. So we designed our economies to be able to do that, to lower income tax on the highest income earners. There's talk in Canada to have a wealth tax, which we do not have. There's talks in Canada and the United States to look at these large corporations that are in tech industries. Jeff Bezos of Amazon, what did he, something like $50 billion he earned already in the pandemic. Special taxes that for those that have done really well during this time of crisis. But we've lowered corporate income taxes, and there'll be pressure from them to do this to allow the economy to get back on its feet. And so I think we really have to look at that from an ethical perspective. So we have a lot of difficult trends happening. And if religion doesn't speak, especially to the ecological crisis, some think it will be an obsolete distraction. And none of us, I think, want our ministry to be part of an obsolete distraction. So what might we do? Quickly, faith communities should not think there's nothing we can do. We shape cosmologies. We shape ways that people think about the world. We shape ways that people understand what a good life and good living is. The churches still have moral authority. Most faith communities do. They speak to our better side, and they're listened by many. We still have a huge base of adherents and significant material resources, even if they might be seen to be challenged by the COVID crisis as well. And finally, we have an amazing capacity to build community among people who are looking for meaning in their lives. So how have some of our churches been involved? Again, I'll look particularly at Canada to suggest some ideas. Back in 2003, the Canadian bishops released their first letter, a pastoral letter on ecology. And, you know, that letter was interesting because there were 3 responses that were suggested. Now, I'm going to go through this very, very quickly, but sometimes it's helpful to just break down possibilities in broad categories. So we might all ask ourselves, the first response that we're called to is a contemplative response. Have we, each and every one of us, been bringing our prayer to God, our praise of God? Have we been bringing that forward in a different way since Laudato Si? Have we been looking at how we pray, what is important to us? And for those of you that are involved in parishes and lead liturgy, how has our liturgy changed to bring this new ecological consciousness into our celebrations? One small but wonderful example of this was in the prayers of intercession, or the prayers of the faithful in Mass. One parish used, they always mentioned a species that was at risk of extinction in the prayers for intercession. Now, of course, was a little strange for the congregation at first, perhaps. The people that were leading young people in Sunday school had to explain to the kids what was going on. And of course, they cottoned on right away. But if we begin to bring these things, if they're important, into our prayer life together, it can change. It can change our prayer life. It can change our meditation. It can change our contemplative responses. A second response that was suggested in this pastoral letter for Canadians was to look at our ascetic response. That is to say, are we living more carefully? Are we living more attentively? Are we, for example, aware that how 15 million metric tons of plastic enters our ocean every year, and how there's already more by dead weight, there's more plastic in the world than there is of all the animals and fish on the planet. Uh, do we need to look at our use of fossil fuels, how much we drive, how much we travel? Is there a way to simplify our lifestyles? And then the third response, perhaps the most difficult, is the prophetic response. Even if we change our lifestyles and take many small steps that are necessary, we know that systemic change is necessary. Francis is absolutely clear on this, as we'll see in some of the later slides. So there are many ways that we can bring a prophetic response to encourage our people to move forward and to perhaps live out what we would like to see. So in the November 21 webinar in this series, we heard about how the Oblate Central House in Rome has moved to green the infrastructure of the building. Young people suggest that system change, not climate change, is what they're interested in. We can participate in rallies. Here was one in Ottawa just before the Paris Climate Accord in 2015. There were thousands of people. Our particular parish, I have to have a call out to Pastor Jim Bleakley, whom I saw on this, mostly so he just doesn't give me a rough time if I were ever allowed to go back to church. But at St. Joe's in Oblat Parish, there was a sermon on climate change and the Paris Accord and Laudato Si, and then many people, a couple hundred people, walked together to join this rally then, so Christians can be part of that activity. And this is a Lenten campaign called Give It Up for the Earth, where people were asked to take, and just not Catholics, but people in all churches that celebrate Lent, were asked to look at, well, maybe instead of just giving up candy in Lent, could we actually drive our cars less? Could we use less plastic? Could we look at how our food is prepared and wrapped? Could we eat less meat, which is also something that we used to do during Lent quite often? But then could we also call upon government to take actions that are necessary, and in this case, end subsidies to fossil fuel companies, which, by the way, all of the G7 countries agreed to do in 2009. Some of us, like Canada, haven't done that. So the minister is sitting here with a card with the white jacket on, and these women took these signed cards from many, many congregations and parishes. Someone from Development and Peace, the Catholic Aid Agency. The woman sitting on the left is a chaplain in the local Catholic high school. The young woman on the right is the head of their social justice club. And I love telling the story of the tall woman on the right standing when she was an intern for us in this campaign. And when she came to work, I asked her, "Are you a PK?" Which means a preacher's kid. She said, "No, I'm not a PK, I'm a BK." I said, "A BK? What's a BK?" She said, "Well, I'm a bishop's kid." And it turns out she's the daughter of the Anglican bishop in Calgary in Canada. So uh, great that this is a picture of all women who got involved, as many people did across the country in these kinds of campaigns. So the ecological crisis calls us all to a profound interior conversion, as Francis says, and it also calls for a community conversion. So following up on this prophetic response, what are our community responses that we can look at? And there are many, many ways. I'll just suggest a couple. This will probably provoke thinking. I don't know if these are possible, but maybe it's worth thinking and talking about. So you may know that the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, led by Cardinal Turkson in Rome, has called this year from the 5th anniversary, last May, to May of 2021, the anniversary year for action on Laudato Si. And what he's trying to do is mainstream. He's asking for groups to prepare for the next 7 years how we might mainstream the teaching in Laudato Si into all of the things we do. I'm going to have to go through this very quickly. So the religious, through the International Union of Superior Generals, has called us to use the See, Judge, and Act methodology, but also track what we've done in reducing our carbon footprints, suggest options to provinces, to congregations, and to look at how we can integrate those actions into our missionary charism by making a public commitment, first of all, celebrate this, reporting on how we're doing, to transition in all of our organizations towards these goals, to put it into our plans, and to try to journey together as we live into integral ecology. So there are many possibilities there. Oblates could look at, certainly at, could we address violence in the home? If this is really hard, I've never heard a homily on conjugal violence and so on, but it's a huge problem right now, not only in Canada, I suppose in other places. And maybe those of us that are leading congregations could address this issue. Vaccine nationalism, a real problem. If vaccines aren't shared, we just heard yesterday that perhaps 40 million will be given of the Pfizer BioNTech will be given to countries of the global south. Africa alone is going to need $1.5 billion. COVAX is where the organization for vaccines to be shared among countries. But Canada has already trying to secure something like 414 million doses of vaccines, but that's 5 times more than what we require. Our prime minister said we'll donate any extra. And while I think all of us are anxious to get, there's no politician alive that won't say his population has to come first, but we do need to act. And Canada's development assistance budget is the lowest that has been in 50 years. So we have work to do here. There are many steps forward. This See, Judge, Act, or See, Discern, Act work of all of us. And I'll just finally end by saying, let's not return to some normal, because normal was the problem in the first place. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for your presentation. And I'm sure it will certainly help us to understand Laudato Si in our context of today and this pandemic. And appreciate very much your expertise and for your sharing it with us in this. We do have a couple of questions that have come, and maybe I can direct those to you, and maybe if you have some comments about those. One came from Father Ali, and he's working, of course, as you know, on the north coast of Quebec. And because of this pandemic, the Indigenous people are living in isolation in their homes. They can't leave. How do they make a possibility for isolation if someone is infected with the virus and living in such close and cramped quarters? I don't know if you have any reflections or if you've had any experiences with this in your talking to others.
Thank you for the question, Father Ali. I know that it's really difficult for Indigenous people. The Oblates in the Notre Dame du Cap province, Father Ali's been directly involved in the work that they've done after an Indigenous woman, Joy Sechaquan, she died in a hospital in Joliet and was not given good care. She was given a racist treatment. So when people get ill, we have to address, are they getting the care they deserve even when they come into the hospital care? But it's very hard to isolate. There's a situation in an oblate parish in northern Saskatchewan where a funeral was held that was a spreading event for COVID. So very difficult to see how to go ahead, and many communities are simply preventing people from coming in because they just don't have the infrastructure to be able to deal with that. And if people get sick, they often have to get flown out of the community. So the only hope we have really is that in many provinces, isolated communities of Indigenous people are going to be the first to get vaccines, and hopefully that will help. Thank you.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Father Miguel Fritz has asked a question. He's in Paraguay, and he has experience working quite a bit with the Mennonite communities. And his experience in the Chaco of Paraguay is that the Mennonites don't seem to be too attentive to the restrictions called for by the pandemic, the socialized isolation, these things. He wanted to just know what might be your experience in Canada with the Mennonite community.
So here we have a much different situation. I don't know what's happening in the Chaco. I think some religious communities are, there is some evidence of some communities that are very close. I don't think they need to respond to these public health demands for social distancing and mask wearing and so on. That's a real shame in some communities. That's certainly the case. Here in Canada, the Mennonites are one of the leading churches in reconciliation with Indigenous people. They're leading that work. They're participating in our next, one of our planned webinars to look at the Synod on the Amazon, which is of course a Catholic synod that was done in Rome. So at least on issues of living more simply and in Indigenous justice, we have another experience of Mennonites really helping lead many of the churches in this work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Father Jerry Conlon in Kenya had a question he would like to raise. Father Jerry, if you would like to mention your question, please.
Thanks, Warren. No, I wasn't asking a question. I was just clapping my hands for the presentation. Oh. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? I think that may be it. So thank you very much for the presentation, and we really appreciate this. Now we'll move to the next part of our program for today. And we have a a 12-minute video presentation about Project Grace of the Oblate Parish of Our Lady of Grace in the National Capital Region in Manila in the Philippines. Basically, it is an urban gardening project located in the compound of the parish church itself and is meant to encourage parishioners to replicate the project in their own backyards. In a way, the church is now an urban demonstration farm that teaches parishioners how to use recyclable materials and organic fertilizers. And the project is led by the parish priest, Father Eduardo Vasquez, OMI, and other oblates in the parish. So we'll see this video, and then Father Ponpon will have a little time if you have some questions about this presentation.
This is Project Grace.
This is Project Grace.
Magtanim ng bago, kaalaman ay lalago. Agrikulturang bago, magsasakay panalo.
Project Grace is the concrete response of the Oblates in Metro Manila, Philippines to the hunger brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic crisis.
The word grace is actually an acronym for Garden Ready Always for Consumption of Everyone. And the main goal of this project is food sufficiency in every home. And this goal, I believe, can only be attained if urban gardening becomes a culture, a way of life for every Filipino family.
This is the Garden of Grace. All vegetables here are planted in a recyclable container donated by the parishioners of the Shrine of Our Lady of Grace under the Diocese of Caloocan. These vegetables are intended to feed the poor affected by the pandemic crisis.
This garden started only with 2 recycled containers. I started it here in the church compound before the pandemic crisis began. But when the lockdown was imposed by the government, we Oblates got the chance to persuade the people to do the same.
As far as I remember it was on a live stream mass when Father Ponpon, the parish priest of the Shrine of Our Lady of Grace, challenged people to plant vegetables in their homes. When people started to see us Oblates wearing working clothes, planting vegetables, touching soil, getting dirty, harvesting, all of these have triggered curiosity to people.
Father Ray Amancio, an Oblate missionary assigned in China, has been stranded in the shrine for almost a year now. He is the brain behind the naming of the Project Grace.
Project Grace takes its rootedness from from a simple dream to have a garden ready always for consumption of everyone, yet daring all of this prophetic call for a simple yet radical response. I saw grace at work when the lockdown took its toll during my stay here in Caloocan. From the time when we first braved the fringes or the kasuluk-sulukan of its hallowed streets to distribute basic food aids, I was already faced by the reality of homelessness and perturbed by those who were indirectly troubled by the effects of the virus. For instance, the paleros or the garbage collectors, the street vendors, the street dwellers, and the jeepney drivers. Since then, the external crisis has set a journey into my kaloob-looban towards disturbing my innermost core as a young oblate missionary. Simply, it was a metanoia for me, an ecological conversion even, for it posed an even greater impetus towards a change of the way of living, to humility, to bending down to touch the soil, to burrow the seeds and hope for a yield, to embrace the culture of planting, to simply having a staple food on the plate in every home.
Reverend Joseph Nadwa, an OMI deacon and a professional agriculturist, was also stranded in Manila for a few months. While waiting for his travel pass going to his official assignment in the southern part of the Philippines, he helped a lot in the rapid implementation of the Project RACE. He introduced to Project RACE the technology of hydroponics. On August 5, 2020, a memorandum of agreement was signed by the Diocese of Caloocan and the Department of Agriculture of the Philippine government to promote integrated urban agriculture. In this agreement, the Shrine of Our Lady of Grace was officially recognized as demonstration farm for urban agriculture. One of its tasks as demonstration farm is to provide technical assistance and facility to those who are interested in the urban agriculture. With this new status of the shrine as demonstration farm, more people have come to visit the place, not only to pray, but to undergo trainings and to witness the beauty of urban farming. As of December 2020, around 1,600 individuals have already undergone seminar workshops and webinars in urban gardening. The encyclical Laudato Si is always one of the topics included the seminar workshops with emphasis on the call of Pope Francis for global ecological conversion.
Global ecological conversion is the call of Pope Francis to a change of lifestyle. A lifestyle which is not destructive to the environment. In the seminar that we facilitate, we inspire and challenge the participants to respond concretely to this call of Pope Francis through recycling, composting, and using organic fertilizers in their garden. Usually at the beginning of the seminars, the participants are asked to harvest the available vegetables in the compound of the shrine, and their harvests are served to them during mealtime.
On November 2020, to make people more aggressive in planting vegetables in their homes, two major contests were launched in Caloocan, a Veggie Christmas Tree Challenge and a contest on ecological lantern known as Ning Ning ng Hardin Challenge. This was participated by residents of villages and basic ecclesial communities of the Shrine of Our Lady of Grace.
I am very happy because the local government of Caloocan fully supported the two big contests we initiated. The basic goal of the two contests was to repackage urban gardening and make it more attractive to people. This is a creative way of encouraging them to plant vegetables in their homes. Our local government leaders and some friends in the business sector sponsored the prizes for the contest. And I think this is a good indicator that this project has a very bright future.
The Project Grace has been in existence for 10 months now. It is still young, but it has already created a big impact, not just within the Shrine of Our Lady of Grace, but in the whole country. It has been featured many times in the radio and TV programs of national and international media, such as in BBC News. ABS-CBN News Online, GMA 7 TV program Bawal ang Judgmental Online Exclusives, GMA 7 National TV program Stand for Truth, and ABS-CBN TV program Ibayan, hosted by TV actress Miss Angel Locsin, the most admired woman in the Philippines.
What I hope to achieve concretely in the near future is to have a Sunday market here in the shrine where people will just bring their organic vegetables from their garden and sell them. This Sunday market can also be a center for barter trade where people can just have an exchange of products without money involved.
I believe this project will continue to fly high. Many parishioners are now inspired to plant vegetables because of this initiative. This is very simple and doable. Nobody will go hungry if every family will participate in this project.
The Project Grace only began with 2 small recycled containers. After just a few months, these containers multiplied into hundreds, then to thousands, and now the numbers are still growing. These small recycled containers, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world. It is a little act, but can make a big impact. Join us in this project.
Laudato Si, oh mi Signore, Laudato Si, oh mi Signore, Laudato Si, oh mi Signore, Laudato Si, oh mi Signore. Yes, be praised in all your creatures, sun, our brother, moon, our sister, in the stars and in the breezes, air and fire and flowing water. Laudato Si, oh mi Signore, Laudato Si, oh mi Signore, Laudato Si, oh mi Signore, Laudato Si, oh mi Signore. Thank you for the earth, our mother, she who feeds us and sustains us, for our fruits, our grass, our flowers, for the mountains and the oceans. Laudato Si, oh mi Signore, Laudato Si, oh mi Signore, Laudato Si, oh mi Signore, Laudato Si, oh mi Signore. Praise for those who spread forgiveness, those who share your peace with others, bearing trials and sickness bravely, even sister death for them. Laudato Si, oh mi Signore, 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 Laudato Si.
We'd like to thank Father Vasquez Ponpon and his community for sharing this video with us. Very well done. And we did have a couple of questions that have come. And so we appreciate you. We know that this is quite late at night that you're joining us. We're so happy that we're able to share this moment together. Questions were asked how the project is funded, and have you made any kind of a video which may teach how to get this project started in other communities?
Yeah. Is it we receive donations from people, from the parishioners. When I came out to different media outfit, donations started to come in. So that's where we started. And then one of our parishioners, when they see the basic containers that we are using, many were encouraged to donate the plastics and including also funds. That's the time when we started the greenhouse where we can start planting in the eggshells. Actually, this project is not very expensive. We just have uh, to focus on some what do you call that? The big structure there is the big thing there is the the, do you call that, the greenhouse. Once you have that, then everything follows. That could be provided by ordinary parishioners. Just simple giving of the donation of the recycled containers. And then what's the other question?
If you have a video of teaching how it might be
Yes,
done.
we upload, we have webinars, and we upload the seminars in the, what do you call that, in the official page of the parish. Yeah, like the production of organic fertilizers. Yeah.
So that's the video page of Our Lady of Grace Parish in Colecan. What is the, maybe you can send,
The page.
type in the address, or maybe
Yeah,
we can send that
just
out.
the Shrine of Our Lady of Grace. Yeah,
Shrine of Our Lady
Caloocan
of
City.
Grace.
That's the web page.
And there was another question I think was also interesting. Has there been kind of a theological reflection about this particular project of kind of the coming together of ecology and theology? Any studies that may look to see how this project and its impact could be an oblate contribution in this way to a Laudato Si and the impetus for doing this, especially during the time of the COVID?
Yeah. I started actually consulting Father Phil Estrella and to put some scriptural texts about what we do. And with the presence of these oblates with me here now, we can make a deeper theological reflections later on.
Well, very good. Thank you again for your presence with us, for sharing this, and for the great oblate example and experience that you have shown all of us and all the community.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So as we conclude our webinar together, I give thanks again to Joe Gunn for his presentation. We would like to thank especially today Father Daniel LeBlanc and Father Diego Saiz Martin, who are translators. And thank you very much for your time and for your efforts to make this available. I thank all of you who have joined us this day or at any other time you watch this later to reflect on Pope Francis' teaching and the implications of Laudato Si in our lives. I invite you to please join us for our next webinar, which is Saturday, February the 20th. So we conclude now. Praise be Jesus Christ and Mary Immaculate.